Hi, this is János, it's Real World Audio, and today I'm going to get into a subject that is very exciting for all of us who are looking for loudspeakers, or actually you already have a loudspeaker but you're looking for an amplifier to match for a loudspeaker. So the title for the video is how to match amplifier power to your loudspeaker. And I made this video inspired by Scott Spinner one, because he asked me a question. Hi, what amp would be good for my speakers? 94 dB, 6 ohm. And I told him that we need quite a bit more to find out what's going on, and he was super nice and he gave a lot more information, and what drivers there are in the speakers, what is the recommended amplifier wattage for it, and what's the frequency response, and the sensitivity 94 dB was given at 2.83 volts at 1 meter, and the nominal impedance is 6 ohms. But so at this point we know quite a bit more, but we still don't know exactly how difficult to drive this speaker is. And then the sad truth is that nowadays the words nominal impedance doesn't mean anything. So you don't know when a company gives you figures, is it truly the nominal impedance that they give to you, or they just give you a random number that has no relationship whatsoever to reality. And why am I saying this? I'm saying this because nowadays, and it's probably the reason why it's happening, is it's just the bad culture created by the reviewer community and those people who measure loudspeakers and amplifiers for big review papers, that this system, that 2.83 volt per meter, became a standard nowadays. And the nominal, and actually this system to work, to make it useful for the customer, to give you any information whatsoever that you can connect to reality, you put to practice, it absolutely hinges on the fact that the nominal impedance value they give to you is the actual nominal impedance. And I will go into the details what the actual nominal impedance means, and when do you know whether the company gave you the nominal impedance or they just came up with a random number and they are lying to your face. So this is really important, and let's just get into it, what's going on. So at this point I really have no idea how sensitive these speakers are really, and how much, what sort of an amplifier you need to drive them. However, there's an indication that it has 15-inch woofers and compression driver, so that gives us a hint that it uses at least loudspeaker technology that was aimed at efficient sound reproduction. So most likely you will be okay with using even like what is today considered as medium or lowish power amplification. What is considered like that, even people like call nowadays like 100 watts low power, which is totally insane. But anyway, so I will go into detail that actually for this loudspeaker, what is it you want to listen to, what are your needs, that's going to define what amplifier you want, and also the room size, because it's vastly different what amp you need if you are in a small room or you are in a giant hall that you have in your home. Maybe you have a living room of 100 square meters, like 1,000 square feet, then it's a totally different power requirement compared to a bedroom or a small or normal living room. So now let's get back to our roadshow, educational roadshow. So what's going on? So to determine how good a match the amplifier will be to your loudspeaker, there are three demands that your loudspeaker has on your amplifier. And one of them is the demands for sound pressure level. So to get a certain volume of reproduction out of your loudspeaker amp combo, you need at least a certain number of watts. We will go into detail how much you exactly need in watts for what kind of listening experience. Number two requirement that the amplifier is demanded of is the bass reproduction. And that's where the impedance counts, that basically you need an amplifier that has a true nominal impedance at the same value that your amplifier wants to see. So let's say your amplifier has a capability to drive 8 ohms properly, then you want to see an 8 ohm nominal loudspeaker. If your loudspeaker is below those 8 ohms, you are going to get a softening in the bass response. You are going to get, you lose more and more control over the bass, and the sound becomes softer and softer. So let's say if you find that the bass in your room is already over dampened and too harsh and too much, then this might work to your advantage. But the majority of people who are buying new amplifiers, new speakers, they tend to want the exact opposite. They tend to want more in control bass response and higher in level. But if that's not to you, you can go for a little dip in the impedance, but not much. So on an 8 ohms compatible amplifier, you can dig down to about 6 ohms, but not lower. So if you have a 4 ohms loudspeaker, you are connecting it to an 8 ohms amplifier, that's going to be a really worsening, noticeable worsening in the quality of bass you are getting. Oh, the cat is stuck outside. Machi, come in. Okay, I'm letting her in. So that's going to be a dive no matter what. But if your speakers are only 6 ohms, they actually might work better with your 8 ohms amplifier, depending on your room and on your actual listening situation. And number 3 requirement that your loudspeaker is demanding from your amplifier is the distortion. And how distortion works is the lower the impedance of the loudspeaker, the more current demands it has from your amplifier, the higher the distortion will be. I just want to emphasize this for those of you who say that I just throw double the power at the loudspeaker if it needs double the current and we are okay. As far as bass and SPL, yes, you are perfectly okay. As far as distortion, you are not okay, because you are going to get double the distortion compared to having that nice high nominal impedance. Like in this case of going double the current, you are doubling the distortion. And if you need more than double the current, then you get more than double the distortion. And we are nowadays in a world where we have a variety of loudspeakers ranging from 16 ohms impedance down to below 2 ohms impedance. That below 2 ohm impedance has pulls out 10 times the distortion from your amplifier compared to that 16 ohm loudspeaker. So yes, it's going to make a world of a difference if your point is actually sound quality and not just amount of sound pressure and amount of bass. If you want a little bit more than that, you are a little bit more discerning than just blowing up your neighbors with the sound. you want actually to affect higher quality, not just quantity, then loudspeaker actual nominal impedance and actual current needs make a world of a difference. And as far as distortion goes, it works differently with the tube amplification and it works different with solid state amplification, or I would it's more complex than this, but if we just totally oversimplify it, and that's going to incur a lot of exceptions, totally oversimplified with solid states, when you have distortion, it's a harsh distortion, so it means that the more your amplifier distorts, the harsher the sound gets, and it will cause listening fatigue. And for tube amplifiers, the more distortion you have, the softer the sound gets, and it will feel that you are getting a looser sound, but it's not giving you listening fatigue. So this number 3 will work out for you depending of your status of your hearing. If your hearing is intact, then the harsh distortion will be utterly unpalatable for you, and when it happens, you will instantly recognize it as a plummet in the sound quality. And if your hearing is compromised and you have difficulty hearing the whole frequency range, maybe you just hear up to like 12 kilohertz, 13 kilohertz, then that will affect you very little. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It's probably there, and it's driving your wife and your kids and your animals completely nuts. They can't even listen to it more than 2 seconds. They just, when you turn on the stereo, everyone leaves your room. That's how you know that it really sounds crappy. You just don't hear it. However, when you have a tube system that takes care of this fatigue, it just takes it to a lower level when you are pressing the distortion higher. It's getting softer, and if you have already compromised in your hearing and the sound gets even softer, if you hear very little to start to begin with, and then you get even less than that, then of course you will find it very much distasteful for you, and it's not for you. So that's why when we talk about distortion and amplifier choices, solid state or vacuum tube for your loudspeaker, it's your hearing that comes to the mix. That's number 1 criteria, and don't judge yourself whether how your state of your hearing is. If you can hear up to 8 kilohertz, that's what you get. It's your ears. Don't worry. Just pick the equipment that works for you. Just be aware that others might find it either favorable or non-favorable, but it's for you who you are buying the loudspeaker for. Then you go with that criteria. If you are buying your loudspeaker and amp combo to satisfy not just you but your family as well, you might need to go for very different criteria compared to just buying for yourself. And you have to be mindful that people who have the full range of hearing, they are going to hear the nasties, the distortion nasties, that the utterly abysmal impedance dips introduced to the system. So let's just now go back to our here to Bowers and Wilkins. This is I just chose this loudspeaker because because everyone knows about it, and traditionally British loudspeaker companies were the champions of properly giving measurements for their loudspeakers, but that is of the past. At least Bowers and Wilkins, you cannot depend on them to be honest about their ratings. There are other British companies. I think they are much better with that, but the world is changing, so you need to inspect the values, the figures, and in the case of this speaker, this is a stereophile review. I will put the link in the video, and it's the 805D3 loudspeaker. and it's the loudspeaker measurements they publish. So let's read about that. So the nominal impedance is 8 ohms. So that's what Bauer Wilkins put on the specification sheet for this loudspeaker, that it is an 8 ohm nominal loudspeaker. What does this tell us? This tells us that according to the manufacturer, you should use an 8 ohm amplifier that has an 8 ohm driving capability. And they also say that it's 88 dB per 2.83 volt per meter sensitive. So then you say, okay, these numbers tell me that this is a reasonably sensitive loudspeaker and 8 ohm nominal impedance, so this should be a piece of cake to drive. And if you have, let's say, a tube amplifier that is like a 20 watt push-pull tube amplifier, that should be a match in heaven for this loudspeaker and should drive it easily like a piece of cake, and you still have plenty of headroom even for your wildest listening parties. But looking at the actual measurement, so when they measure the actual impedance of this loudspeaker, it turns out that 8 ohm nominal impedance statement was a lie. It was an outright lie, because it is, look, the number there is 4 ohms, so this loudspeaker dips essentially to 4 ohms. So this is really a 4 ohm loudspeaker, probably like a 5 ohm nominal loudspeaker. And as the sensitivity rating was given in that 2.83 volt bogus scale, the sensitivity is not 88 volt per blah blah blah, but it's actually 86 dB per watt per meter. And why am I jumping now to the watt per meter? Because when you are using that volt per meter, it tells you absolutely nothing what sort of amplifier you need to look at it, because the amplifiers are not sold that, okay, this amplifier puts out 15 volts or 200 volts. They are sold as 100 watt or 300 watt, 1000 watt, 2 watt. They are using watts to sell us the amplifiers. And you see, now they started this volt scale to sell us the loudspeakers, and the two don't match, the two don't talk. So what happens when you have such a mismatch in the scales? This is what I call the Mars Climate Orbiter disaster. So this was a satellite that was a collaboration between NASA and Lockheed Martin, and the engineering team did not really talk to each other while they developed this Mars probe. And NASA used metric system, and Lockheed Martin used US customary system. So basically meters and kilograms versus inches, feet, miles, pound, ounces. And they lost the satellite. And they don't even know where it is. They can't even track it. It was maybe destroyed on fall into Mars or got into orbit around the sun. No clue whatsoever. So this is what is happening when you go for disconnect the scales between the two systems that should be talking to each other. So we are getting sold loudspeakers in the dB per watt scale basically, and we are getting sold amplifiers in a volt scale. And to match the two, you would need to have a correct nominal impedance figure and then do mathematical gymnastics to convert that volt into watts, and then you can figure out how much power does your amplifier actually generate to drive your speakers. So that's why it's a giant farce that the industry has come up with to just disconnect the customers from making proper decisions. And this is a really, really big issue, but no one's talking about it because stereophile, they want the companies to advertise with them, and they want to keep good relationship with them, and they don't have the upper hand, and sadly they don't even have the upper hand to maintain proper scientific standards and proper standards for the customers to make educated decisions. And this is really a big thing, and if you think about John DeVore of DeVore Fidelity, that loudspeaker company, he started his loudspeaker company because he was so upset by this volt per blah, 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 scam, that he said, no, today the world is so BS, you cannot tell whether that loudspeaker is really sensitive and efficient and can be driven by a normal amplifier, or you need an arc welder to supply it. So he created a company where he uses proper specification, and he tells you honestly what do you need to drive that speaker, so you can really know that are you getting Cinderella or are you getting the ugly stepmother, because that's the difference. So when we had a look at that Bauer Wilkins loudspeaker there, the brochure told us with that sensitivity rating and with that nominal impedance rating that you are getting Cinderella. But when Stereophile measured it, it really told you that you are getting the ugly stepmother. It's not Cinderella. The difference is that huge. So instead of being able to use your maybe like 20-year-old or brand new whatever lowish mid-power push-pull tube amplifier, and you thought that it will work perfectly because you were given those numbers that indicate that, but you were lied to, and what you actually need to drive your speakers is a high power solid state amplifier. So that's the kind of world we live in today, is that unless you go into it and you see those figures, the actual dips, the actual nominal impedance, not that BS that they put on the paper, then you can make the choice of whether the amplifier will tick these 3 boxes or not. And let's see what else. We are at 22 minutes, so let's call this video a stop, a pause, and we will continue from here, which will be the part number 2. So please like, subscribe, and I hope that you are making educated choices when you are selecting your amplifiers for your speakers, and we'll continue from here. Bye bye.